Hey folks, it's Michael with the Reason RX podcast. I'm here with my co-host
Melanie in
from
Minnesota.
right. Now she beat me to it. Dang it! But um, today we're going to be talking to Gundula Bosch. Did I get the name right, or did I
Mhm.
butcher it? Okay, sweet. It's acceptable. Okay. Um, she's at Johns Hopkins, and I heard about her and got her in touch as started off reading the book Range by David Epstein. Um, the subtitle is Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World. Really good book. I recommend it. But it was discussing many different people and looking at evidence from different places, sports, education, business, and it discussed the R3 program at Johns Hopkins University. And so I got in touch with them and Arturo Casadevall and Gundula Bosch, and Gundula is gracious enough to join us. We're going to talk about the nature of science education, what we can do to improve it, some flaws in it, and I know this is relevant. I know from my own experience. I worked with one student, for example, um, when he took immunology in school, he got 102. And he said his teacher told him that's the highest grade she had ever given in 20 years at Texas A&M. So it was Texas A&M, good university, not just some pedunk thing. But I did not tutor him in immunology. It's like zero tutoring. The thing he learned was about the nature of science and how to do it. He learned about study skills and how to remember things and learn and
Mhm.
memorize. He learned how to reason and how to be logical. There's still a whole lot more I could teach him, but even with what I did, he was able to apply that to this class and get 102. But it's not just academic. This guy also was able to defend himself against 3 veterinarians in high school about the proper diet for cats. So, of course, the vets trained by some companies, would say it should be like kibble or this and that. And he was able to do research, see what the nature of cats is like, see what they're like in nature, come up with actual proof that he was right. And he was able to actually, be confident against a vociferous vet that he was right and actually get the vet to be quiet. Um, and he's also, he got 2 degrees, undergrad, biochemistry and genetics. And he, like a lot of professors, knew the work he did in labs, and so a lot of them would try to get him to work in their lab instead of where he was. So it's not just an academic thing. This is like good all around. He also did. I taught him like how to do a squat, and he did the best squat his kinesiology professor had ever seen, and partly on that basis got an A. And the point here is not, oh, I'm so great, blah, 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 look at me. The point is, this is what we can do with students. This should be the normal. I'm not a super genius. I learn from other people. This should be more widespread. If I can do it, other teachers could do it. It should be kind of more common. And we need to work on having these methods instilled in education and teachers in general, so it help our culture, help students, help in general. Anything to add, Melanie? No? Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great. Thank you for the
Yeah.
background on how you came to know Gundula.
Cool.
Hmm.
So, but, and it's come up with other students, but same thing at Johns Hopkins. They're finding some similar issues. But Gundula, could you tell us about yourself and what you do and what your background is?
Well, thanks, Michael, and thanks for the very kind invitation. I'm very honored that you are featuring us. So this is great, and we were really amazed how you found us. So this is very
Yeah.
nice. So we were quite delighted. So yeah, so as you mentioned, together with my partner in crime, if you will, Arturo Casadevall.
Yeah.
Arturo is actually the founder of the program. He came as a chair to us at Johns Hopkins in, I think, mid-2015, and he came with the idea that he wanted on a large scale reform graduate science education. And so basically, this is the reason why he actually left Albert Einstein College of Medicine, where he had been for long years. And he basically came here to say, well, I wanna have something different. I wanna make a big difference in the way how we teach science, particularly on the graduate level, but definitely also expanding to undergraduate and school levels, even elementary levels eventually. We are just starting, of course, with the area that we currently have our students in. So you need to start with some population at some point, right? Yeah, we met there when he was recruited to the school. I was already in the department, had a different function until that time. And at some point he stepped into my office and said, well, good morning, my name is Arturo Casadeval. I need somebody who can drop everything else they do and, start building a program in this fancy new project that I have. And besides, how would you teach critical thinking, right? So, and it happened that exactly by that time I had later in my life, although I'm a trained biochemist, originally from Germany and did research for many years, but focused a lot in the years before that encounter with Arturo on more and more on teaching and education. And I had just out of passion added a degree in education later in life, in my early 40s, and that focused on educational leadership and program evaluations. It was exactly what Arturo wanted, and so it just fell into place that we had similar interests. And, in the graduate education world, it is kind of not unusual to measure something as abstract as critical thinking. And so we have multiple ways how to, think critically about many different areas, as you just mentioned, actually, from your son as a prime example, right? So you teach skills and you think critically about certain areas, you apply those skills, and instead of training subject matter stuffing, you teach skills, right? And critical thinking is nothing else than a skill set. Right. So, and of course, you can measure that skill set like everything else. And so it's just not the normal way how we teach science nowadays, however it should be. Yeah. And so this is what we did. We started building the program from then onwards. So we, in beginning of 2016, we were able to carve out a position for me at the school with the great support of the deanship. And since then, I've been doing this full time, right? So, and we started with the program in early 17. So basically, it took me a year to start get the first courses off the ground. And we offer this across the entire school. So, school in this case is the School of Public Health, where we are based. However, our courses are open to everybody at the Johns Hopkins University. And as soon as I have a little bit more woman power in my case, so until recently I was doing this pretty much alone. We now have a little bit more support in terms of both we get more instructors as well as more administrative support, and mainly because we got more money, of course, for doing things. That we will also soon be able to offer a couple of those exercises and course modules in an open online environment, which is able for people outside of Hopkins. But we're not quite there yet, so don't nail me down to the exact month when we are able to do that. But so it's definitely in the making. Yeah, so this was our background of start. We started small, organically. We added courses on essentially what is good science and how to critically think and do science, essentially. Basically all skill-based, on the graduate level, focusing first on the life sciences because this is our base, right? We are an infectious disease and immunology department. However, we have other life science departments in the school, which is a bit unusual for a public health school, which is normally social science based. And our courses are being taken on a voluntary basis from students all across the board and all across different disciplines, from the social to the economic sciences, the life sciences, which we are part of, to environmental sciences. And recently also, because we expanded across the divisions, engineering and technology as well. Yeah, so that's actually a wide range of students. Not, of course, all courses from the same population, but we have quite a bit of a population together, which is very nicely diverse, and the students very much enjoy the interdisciplinary aspect that comes with that.
Yeah, very important. But and what is your personal background? What are your degrees? Where'd you get them?
I'm originally from Germany. I've been living in the US over 15 years. Originally, I studied biology, did my PhD still in Munich. But I've been trained as a biochemist ever since. So I did not really do classic biology research. I did much more biochemistry, which is of course related. And after the PhD, I went to University of Washington in Seattle, where I still did mainly research in biochemistry, but discovered also that my true passion is teaching. So I got into a teaching fellowship there, and since then just I caught fire and couldn't let go. So and how does this is already, like, when was that? This was between 2006 and 9-ish, around that area. And you know how this always is, you kind of, the older you get, the more you seek meaning in your life, right? And this was simply adding so much meaning that I managed in the years to come to increase the degree to which I was teaching so much more that there was less and less time for lab research. I did a little bit of computational research towards the end, but at the end, everything that was connected to teaching was taking up so much more time that I just didn't have time for the lab research anymore, which, I'm still involved and still doing a lot of activities that are connected with lab sciences, but I don't do this by hand anymore. There's just no time. And so this is how that went, and then of course I topped it off with that degree in education, which was adding another, if you will, capstone of that meaning-making progress, because you can add a lot of connections between the different modules instead of just teaching. You kind of have a better way of doing evaluative research and figuring out, how effective is your approach. You have, as I mentioned before, you have more intricate approaches on measuring and teaching abstract constructs like, just skills, like thinking skills, evaluative skills, as opposed to, how, for example, how does the immune system work, which is a descriptive endeavor, right? Mm-hmm. So, but skills are always something that is conceptual, and you apply it to different contexts, right? And that's exactly what we do in the R3 program. And actually, I have a little bit of an update because we are now called the R3ISE program. The R3 is still the R3 in there, just the 3 is silent because we so many people use the 3 R's in different ways, also for recycling or any kind of other things. And we actually found that other disciplines that have to do with animal safety actually use the 3 R's much longer. To avoid confusion, and because we are harbored in the R3 Center for Innovation and Science Education, which is I'm the director of, and this abbreviates as R3ISE with the 3 in the exponent. Everybody associates us anyway with the R3ISE Center, so we are here at the school anyway called the R3ISE program. So we thought, it might be a nice way to transition from R3 only to R3ISE. So, we still incorporate them. Mm-hmm.
So R3ISE. Right.
Yeah, it's R3ISE.
Okay.
So the 3 is still there, but it's silent.
Okay.
Yeah.
And before we go on
before
we go on much further, how did you get interested in biology?
Sorry, what was it?
How did you get interested in biology?
In biology, it's very classic actually. When I just liked the study subject, right? So I had two favorite subjects at school, which one was geography and the other was biology, and I just chose one of them. So biology was always something that I found, I just liked always the way how not only to describe the world, but understand it a little bit more, so it had a fundamental way of looking into connections and understanding fundamental processes, and this kind of got me into that. Geography, I liked it a lot, but it was too descriptive. Biology adds, this underlying connection of understanding why things are as they are, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did you live in a rural or city when you were growing up, or did you run around in the woods and stuff? Or
actually, no. I'm from Munich. I'm pretty urban.
Okay.
It was a very classic, urban childhood. So my parents are actually not scientists. I'm a first generation. So we have this actually a lot in Germany. We have quite a few people who are not coming from academic backgrounds who are in academia. This is something that is not very uncommon. Mm-hmm. It's just the way how the education system is structured that it's a very exploratory way of doing that. So, maybe I had good teachers. Maybe that is. I actually cannot recall them so much except for one person who was pretty funny, and so maybe he inspired me. I cannot even tell you anymore. Wow. I'm at midlife now, so maybe I should have given me more credit.
Interesting. Cool. Any questions, Melanie?
Well, I was actually going to ask that when you were growing up, if you had anyone that really inspired you. I'm in music, but I feel like because of that, I'm in music probably because of the different mentors I had growing up. It was a very positive relationship to work with them. So I think that's what determined my path. But I just wondered, for people out there who are even looking for a path still, it's a big choice. Was it easy to do biology, or was it really?
It wasn't straightforward at all. My entire career is not straightforward. So I think it's always what I tell my students. Actually, there is students. For example, my husband, whom I actually met in the first chemistry course at university already. So he studied the exact same thing, but he actually is a classic way of as you said, running around in the woods, if you will, right? So dug out worms and did things with them. Probably not ethical. And so as a child, probably put them in the freezer.
That's what kids do.
This, right? Yeah.
I think a lot of great American conservationists grew up hunting and stuff like that, fishing and all that.
Yeah, I'm not sure we should recommend torturing animals to our children. But anyway, so pretty much this is what he did, because his mom tells me always, what she found in the freezer.
Cool.
It's like maybe not so encouraging for the other mothers who might be listening to this podcast. So anyway, so he knew from just an exploratory way of finding his passion and curiosity from early childhood onwards, that is any kind of things with the sciences, right? He wasn't very specific about what kind of sciences, but he wanted to do something with the life sciences, right? And for me, this was actually more something that I liked things that helped me understand things, right? So I'm a reflective type. I like this. This is what I can remember from my adolescence a lot, that I liked, kind of reflecting on books and making connections, right? So, and this is what I truly enjoyed, and everything every subject that would help me make these connections. This could also be deeper studies of history, for example, right? But just maybe why I like science history a lot, right? Is something that I liked, and this might be also the reason why I enjoy philosophy, because philosophy really is adding. I didn't have a formal education in philosophy, right? So it's just something that. Philosophy, the strength is there. It teaches you a lot of concepts that are overarching, right? It's an abstraction of certain things, and these concepts can apply to whatever, right? And so that's something that I enjoyed a lot. So, and I didn't come natural at all, not at all. Mainly also because my background from my home is not at all academic, right? So there are no academics in my family actually, and my parents were always, very good at letting me do whatever, I was interested in, but. They were, first they would have never told me what to do, right? So it's like they're just not their nature. They would be supportive of whatever I wanted, but it was for me to find out, right? And so this finding out process was not straightforward at all. Now I'm actually, believe it or not, I'm a banker actually. So I directly after school I did not study. So I went into. I don't know whether you know that the German education for bankers is a formal education of a dual degree kind of study. So you do practice as well as some kind of study. You get a basic education in economic and finance. It's a 2-year education. And then you also learn in the bank. This was something that I think might have been suggested but not enforced by my parents, by something in the beginning which I just thought like, okay, well, adding something that's rock solid. And it just wasn't at all my thing. All right, so I'm not a person who deals with financial products and doesn't sell them any. So I'm not a good seller, but at least not for these products. But so it was an interesting experience. But how this is when you're younger, you still have some time to meander around. And after that, what I knew after this education is I knew that I did not want to do that, and then just went back to my original ideas of. What did you enjoy, right? What did you enjoy at school? And, maybe, as I said, earlier on, maybe I should have given my teachers more credit. It's not that present in my thoughts anymore now, at midlife. So maybe it might have been a little bit more a part of my decision-making process at that time. But I basically went back to that old decision, what do I enjoy most, right? And this was basically geography or biology, and then decided for biology I enjoyed more, just like do it, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe if there would have been a course of study at that time in history of science, I might have taken that one. So I don't know. But I decided for this and stuck with it, and then met my husband in the same undergraduate education. So we went through the whole thing together. essentially, as a side note, also did our PhD on the exact same day, just an hour apart.
Wow.
Yeah, so we were in the same research group at the Max-Planck-Institute.
Okay.
And our professor was not in the mood of driving to the location where the test was being held, the defense was being held twice. So he said, like, you schedule this, that it's at the same day, at the same time, so that I don't have to go there twice.
Yeah.
And so we basically did this, and so we have been until recently we've been able to synchronize our lives pretty much. So
Good.
So it's also nice to talk science at home, right? So it's and understand what each other is doing. And while actually he is not so much into teaching, he actually until recently did only research with great passion. So he's a lab person. So.
And he got the same degree, same exact degree?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's the exact same degree, yeah.
Okay, well, nice.
Well, he does not have a degree in education, but he's just getting an MBA right now.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Impressive. Nice.
Yeah, so we like so we like adding things at later in life. So we like these kind of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it sounds like the life is kind of like just the basic idea of what Steve Jobs says. Follow your passions, do this and that, and sometimes you can't connect the dots and see how things are connected and where you can go until you look backwards. Yeah.
It's also when I started studying education, I was already in my 40s, and I asked my mentors over there, at the School of Education, well, do you think this is too late? And they just laughed at me and said, this is what, education comes to you when the time is there. And this is exactly what it was, right? And the beauty about education is also, no matter what you teach, is, everything in your life before is relevant, literally everything. Right, and this is really, it's beautiful because you really have the impression that everything that you did before can be either given as an advice, can contribute to your teaching, can enrich the way how you understand your students, all these kind of things. You do it much more consciously when you have added the degree in education, because there's a lot of reflective exercises that help you understand yourself as a teacher as well as understand your interactions with the students. So from that point of view, it was very relevant, but I don't think it would have been as relevant had I done this in my late 20s or something, right? So I think it was definitely a good time in my life to do it.
Yeah, there's a lot of wisdom you have available, and you've learned a lot more when you're quote unquote older than when you're younger. Some people think, oh, well, I want someone who's 20 so they can identify with my kid more. Well, then you're missing out a massive amount of life experience and wisdom. And the wisdom is way more important for the kid's future than connecting. They have friends for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and they want to hold on to, right, and to look up to. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very much. I have older parents, and I never found that prejudice having older parents as a disadvantage. So I never saw that. Actually, never.
And I
think it's very individual.
And I think it seems like it's more a bigger aspect of the American culture. Not entirety. Some people are not that way at all, but it seems like in America it's more like worship the youth, forget the old, something like that.
Yeah. I think there's a worldwide problem, but I think we need to recalibrate because the world population is aging, right? So we need to get away from this notion. This is simply not where we are going. Right?
Yeah.
And we are the one which are aging now, right? So we are the Gen Xers, so we should maybe start recalibrating.
Yeah, true. Yeah,
do you find that students come to you for insight on what to do? I mean, I think students would see you as someone who's really understood what she needs and wants to do in life, and they would love that. They would want that. How do you help them, or what do you say to them?
So we have that a lot because particularly at Hopkins, we are a very research-intensive university, and there, of course, I understand that a lot of colleagues who are lovely colleagues, and they're wonderfully supportive, and we really have a lot of fun with interactions with them. Is when you grew up in the research heavy field, right, then of course your focus has always been on furthering your research career to make the steps that are necessary to get where you are now, right? And of course the advice a lot of our research heavy colleagues give the students is that the gold standard is to do the straight online path, straight path to become brilliant in research, build your path, publish a parish, all the usual stuff to become a research professor. And then this kind of course, goes down for the students as well, if this was the only valuable path, and everything else is secondary, if at best, right? So the good thing is why the students come to me is because they see that you can definitely, not only land a good position, but, mainly and most importantly, find absolute fulfillment in alternative pathways, right? So, and they come from you for these examples, how did you, exactly as you asked me now, so how did you come where you are now, right? And what did it mean to you not to continue with wet lab research? How was that for you? How were your interactions with your mentors? How were there any conflicts, things like this, right? So, and I must say that I was incredibly lucky. I do know how it is not to be valued for the decision to be in education. This was in former years, so definitely very conscious decision, because I just had this absolute epiphany moment at the University of Washington where I was, getting bored with what I was doing, right? So, and boredom for me is always a big issue. So my mom tells me this all the time. So I was always a child who gets bored very quickly. And I just lost interest in the project that I was doing at the University of Washington, which was a cool project. I just couldn't feel the passion anymore, right? I had a strong interest, but at the moment when I stepped in one of those panel discussions to hear about what other people did who switched from education into classroom teaching. And I will never forget that moment. There was a blind person sitting there, and he spoke with such intensity about the personal fulfillment he got from classroom teaching and from the interactions with the students. And I was thunderstruck. It said like, yeah, why did I not understand that this was what I was looking for, right? So I understood the difference between the strong interest that I had before in research, or in doing wet lab research, I must say, and the absolute passion I had for teaching, right? And so since then I couldn't let go, and this has never left me. So no matter, sometimes of course teaching also has its, it's moments that are a bit, strenuous, and sometimes also you have successes, and sometimes we have things that don't really go down well in education. Okay, well, fine, but still, it never left me, no matter what happened, right? And so things like this is a good experiences to share with the students, right? So the students see that no matter what their personal interest is, it can be diverse, and it's okay to switch also later in life. And say like, the basis for my career was laid in my 40s, right? So it's like, I was lucky to meet Arturo. Okay, fine, but at some point you also have to be at the right point at the right place. But there's multiple pathways. So, just saying my husband does this MBA. Well, this is because we founded a biotech company when we had a ditch in the career of my husband, right? Cool. So his career wasn't straightforward either. He just basically also followed his passion all the time. And at some point when he had to switch position because of a funding issue. And then we said, like, how about we just, ramp up this little biotech company, which, of course, it comes handy to have his MBA right now for. Yeah. But we learned this by doing, right? So, and while I currently, due to a conflict of commitment interest, I cannot do anything in this company, but my husband is very active. And we learned a lot from his activity there. And just, to share with the students, it is totally fine to, as you said, like, quoted from Steve Jobs, but other people have this too. We like a lot Richard Feynman, the former Nobel Prize in physics, right? And he's of course very expressive in what he sees as his passions. He has always said in academia, but he always said, like, no matter what it is, follow your passions and follow your heart, right? This is how it is.
Really quickly for folks,
much better at what you enjoy.
For folks, really quickly, like Richard Feynman, he got a Nobel Prize in physics. He was on the Challenger Commission. He was regarded as one of the great physics teachers of the 1900s. He did experiments on ants. He learned to play the bongo drums, all this other stuff. He was very well-rounded. He wasn't just like the stereotypical modern idea of like the nerd physicist.
No, not at all.
No, yeah.
Very like personable person as well. Very easy to talk. I understand anyway. I don't know him, but from what I understand, he was a very caring and loving father.
Yeah, so he's also well documented on both the social media from people who quote from his work, as well as from his many interviews, as well as, classroom lectures, which are recorded partly, right? And so, of course, it's very well known how he interacted with and how he acted as an educator, right? So it's very well. So if you wanna look it up, I would just Richard Feynman, and then he will be maybe video even. So there's video lectures of him online. Still applicable today, although they are quite outdated, but from the subject. But it's still the way how he teaches is still very well documented.
Yeah.
And then I think one thing in regard to the teaching thing that is a bad aspect of our culture. I've heard this before. Some people quote George Bernard Shaw. They say, "Those who can do, those who can't teach. They
Yeah.
disparage it. But I'm not impressed with Shaw in the first place, and I go more with Aristotle. Aristotle was much more wise, philosophical, much better ideas. Aristotle said, those who know, do. Those that understand, teach.
Yeah, actually, and this quote which you said in the first place is also existing the other way around, right? Those who can teach, the other ones, the other ones do the research, but those who can, they teach.
Yeah.
Right. So, and this is basically what I did. I'm pretty much with Dewey, with John Dewey, right? So John Dewey was one of the great heroes that I'm always in it. Especially when he's talking about experiential learning. We said he said about you don't learn from experience, you learn from reflection on experience, right? And so that's of course something that is a very deep insight, because especially like we teachers as well as also we parents. When we create experiences, we always think that the students as well as the children learn what we want them to learn. They do not, right? They get something from it which goes on in their head based on that experience, right? And what comes out of that later is very individual, right? So it's informed by the previous experiences and everything else. So it's an illusion to think that you create an experience and that this kind of induces the effect that you want to be. You are lucky when it is the case, but it's not always the case, right? And so the reflection process is something that we need to enhance, right? So in many different ways, mindfulness, self-reflection, and this, you asked me earlier about, is this applicable to various learner levels? Oh, totally. In Scandinavian countries, the inclusion of critical thinking training into all sorts of learner levels, including elementary school and preschool, is very common. So as we know, right, so they lead the pack in terms of educational outcomes and very good statistics when it comes to what the children get away from their educational experiences. And so they are wonderful classroom exercises that are from Finland or from Norway, where they have just a lot of very deep reflection exercises. And you would be amazed what younger children answer to these very complex questions, right? So maybe because they don't overthink them, right? So what you get there is a lot of original thought without secondary thinking. So I encourage everybody. So it's all online. Just Google for it. So it's a great experiences. And so yes, absolutely, you can ask, critical thinking questions as well as all kinds of reflective exercises. Of course, it needs to be in the interest of the students, right, and the children. So, but you can, by adjusting the level a little bit, you can ask very complex questions on the reflective end to all sorts of learners, and you can that way cultivate critical thinking training early on. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What would be an example of a question like that? That what would be some
for young students?
Yeah.
What I've seen from Finland, which I'm always very impressed about, is that for example they like philosophy, which of course is cool. So they asked the students. I think the kids were 6 years old. So I asked them, what is happiness? I asked, what is happiness? And so they ask not what is happiness for you, what is happiness? And anyway, this is complex for us too, right? So they kind of followed them and asked them again at 7, at 8, at 9, and so on, right? So they asked them every year. And so the answers became significantly less, I wouldn't say meaningful, but less original the older the students got, just because there was so much else going on in their head, right? So you almost get the original ideas to values and to genuine feelings much more, how shall I say, undisturbed, right, at early age. So a very interesting baseline measurement, if you will, right? So they asked them interesting. I would encourage just to go online and look at them. And of course, they don't torture people with kind of philosopher stuff, right? So but they asked them the important question. Also, very interesting questions that are being asked for younger students is ethics. Although ethics is not an easy topic, right? So and of course they wouldn't throw young people into ethical dilemmas, right? However, you can ask questions about values, right? So for example, just think at the Generation Z now with the climate change and the Fridays for Future kind of movement. They think very deeply about values. So for example, do we have a right to destroy the environment as a common good for the next generation? Of course we don't, right? But these are deep values which I have rarely seen in current student generations. I see this a lot in the Gen Z, which is currently, in school as well as early ones of them entering colleges right now. But it's a very reflective and very active generation, which I'm very impressed about. So I think these people will be prime targets for critical thinking.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, and regardless, it's like you should want to take care of your kids and provide them the best environment you can. So whatever that is.
Oh, that's our job. This is our job.
That. Yeah.
That's our job as Gen Xers, right?
Yeah. And yeah, I like the point you make. Like everybody else, John Dewey made some mistakes, like every single person in the world. Einstein, Galileo, even Galileo, he didn't know about electromagnetic forces, so he tried to. He thought that some things were held together by vacuum. He tried to get the concept of vacuum and apply it where it didn't belong. You know, everyone makes mistakes, but there's the idea of, like, Dewey can help some people get away from Plato and make sure you're being experiential, focus on experience and process things. Think about, and then think about, okay, well, what's our nature? How should we process things? What is logic? What is the human way to process things? And so you got that broader perspective on the need for critical thinking and all that. So what else, like, can some teachers and parents do to help their kids develop some of these critical thinking skills? So maybe they don't need some, like, the R3 program when they get older because they've already had it.
Can I interject us or jump in there quick before we get to that? I think I'd like to know why we even need this program. I mean, what's going on that they're in college, graduate studies even, and they're not cutting the mustard, you know? I mean, what's going on?
Yeah, so I think you mentioned it early on already, Michael, when you introduced the entire topic. I think you mentioned early on that your son was not learning specialized skills, but he learned to think.
The student I tutored, not a son, but yeah.
All right. So yeah, exactly. But that example which you brought was that the skills were in the focus of the teaching and not the subject matter. Right. So you learned the subject matter through the skills. Right. So of course you used subject matter, but it was not on the knowledge level. It's on the application, analysis, and evaluation level where he learned. Right. And so that's a higher way of learning. What we do currently I wouldn't say all schools, but still in the wide majority of schools, is unfortunately we produce specialists, right? And this is where it comes to, the original idea when you said you had come to the notion of making our interview because you read in Range that generalism is an important skill. Absolutely. And this is what our very dear friend, actually, David Epstein, who came to us for an interview, cool. He came to that idea that he himself is a generalist, and he learned this through his own career path. I think he mentioned this in his book, how he came about to the conviction that generalism is something that brings you further, right? Knowledge nowadays, knowledge is on our cell phones. I mean, knowledge is on Google. However, thinking skills, they don't expire. This is something that the National Academy propagates since many decades. It's just that we seem to have not integrated this into the school system and not in the undergraduate and in the graduate studies system. We create people who are highly specialized in a very limited area. This is important to some degree, of course. If you, for example, in a PhD program, want to do deep investigation in a certain area so that you can, for example, I'm just making an example here, you can develop a vaccine. Right? Sure, of course, you need to develop expertise. You need to have a significant amount of knowledge and in-depth insight in order to get your studies to success, right? So absolutely. However, what is that worth if you cannot put your studies into a greater context? If you don't understand, for example, that one particular component, like, for example, in drug development, this would be my field of research that I originally did, might be also applied to a different organism. So that way you would be wasting research money if you cannot apply what you were developing to something else. It's just one example. There are many ways of thinking that way. You can transdisciplinarily apply many things to many fields when you can abstract. And the way to learn about abstraction is the critical thinking training that not only we do, but that, for example, a certain philosophical underpinning to not dogmatically, but in a very applied form, a philosophical underpinning to learning and thinking science in a very broad sense, teaches you to do. So you can abstract certain foundational elements of what you're doing or all kinds of principles in life and apply them to all kinds of scientific contexts. And science is something that we see also very broadly. Science is not only life sciences or physics or chemistry. There's all kinds of scientific elements in many things that we do. So in Europe, for example, like we see scientific elements in history, in, believe it or not, also in literature, right? So of course, creative writing is not part of science, but there's people who do very scientifically rigorous literature analysis that falls under scientific processes, right? And what this has in common is the desire to add new knowledge. And for this, you need rigorous methods and critical thinking training, right? So you abstract certain methods of rigorous research training to various contexts, and you add knowledge and to, kind of make this known to the public. And for this, for example, another notion, because we mentioned why do we need those skills? Just think about how specialized we are. Unfortunately, also has the consequence that we are not able to communicate well. We are terrible at science, to communicate, especially. So even if it's, especially to the public, but even if it's a little bit outside of our discipline, we are already kind of making things so complicated that we cannot really, not even, have a good dinner conversation, right? So it's very well known that, very specialized scientists ruin every dinner conversation. And this is something that Arturo always tells, so I stole this from him. But he had many really, unpleasant evenings, which he said, so with people who just could not talk about anything else than exactly their lab experiment, which is, of course, not very interesting. And so, and so it's, we need to stop being super specialized and understand things in bigger context and think broadly, critically and broadly. And, a lot of educators, which I'm touring basically the globe with this program, and I just basically came back from Madrid, which was absolutely cool and wonderful visit. And the week before I was in Harvard, actually, and there were wonderful people there. And everybody asked me, do you actually sacrifice depth for breadth? And actually we don't. So actually we don't. I think we've shown that we can have both. We can, our students are definitely adding significant subject matter expertise through their studies, but at the same time they preserve this broad way of thinking outside the box and thinking broadly across the disciplines. And I think both is necessary to do good science.
Yeah, and if we look at it, instead of studying science the way it's done now in schools, where it's just a bunch of applied math, you learn something that someone tells you, and then you do a bunch of word problems, then something else and a bunch of word problems. If we looked at the history of science, it'd be much better. So, for example, some of the stuff you're saying, science would not have developed, and we would not be where we are if not for the connections and the interdisciplinary stuff. That's exactly what Newton did. Terrestrial mechanics and celestial mechanics used to be regarded as different. They were totally separate fields, but he showed that the motion on Earth and motion in the heavens were unified physics. And he brought terrestrial mechanics, celestial mechanics, mathematics, astronomy all together. Or Darwin. How did he come up with evolution? What was that book he read, about population dynamics, And he studied insects when he was in school. So he's putting fields together.
Exactly. He was one of the prime examples of a transdisciplinary, broadly educated person like Einstein as well as Marie Curie, right? To name a woman in this case, right?
Yeah.
And, it was coming back to Feynman. Richard Feynman is actually the one who said,
Hypatia. I wish we knew more about Hypatia, but...
But, there's multiple people who pointed this out. Feynman said there is no disciplines. Disciplines are disciplines. Nature doesn't know any disciplines. This is a human construct. This is what we did in order to think and, give us the kind of impression that we can understand nature better because it's so large and complex. But it is not existing. This is just that we make it, right? But nature doesn't know any of them.
Yeah. Or Hegel was wrong on a lot of things. And he had some bad influences in history, but he was right in saying the true is the whole. WHOE. The true is the whole.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, agree on both of your notions here.
But, and then to kind of add a little more to that, segue off, talking about the need to communicate. That's another thing where people should develop. That helps people think better and communicate with others. And I think it was Feynman that had, if I remember right, he's the one that had the idea that if you understand something, you should be able to explain it to a bartender.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not quite right because
exactly.
some things are complicated, but just the general idea, I think, is like 100% legit, you know?
I think this is a nice segue into what you had asked me earlier about what can you do basically, what can parents do with their children and what can you do on the school level. Exactly that. You know, I think if we all start with communication, then we already got a big step further. I think it might have, you asked me about, early influences in my life, might have helped me exactly the fact that I'm not coming from an academic household. So when my parents are, my father is a retired person from the military and my mom was a bookkeeper. They're both a bit older. I mentioned that I have older parents, so they grew up during the Second World War. They were children while the bombings came, and so basically they had no time for any kind of bigger education because after that, everything was destroyed. So they learned what was necessary to try and make a living, right? But they were always curious. And maybe that curiosity is something that kind of I inherited. I had the fortune of being able to live because they were always very nurturing, right? So maybe that's the reason I developed into a rock solid humanist, right? So that kind of was that's what the R3 program is we are humanists in this program. So we let our students kind of venture, right? Cool. And but there were always this curiosity of trying to understand, right? And so basically when I came home and from my studies, when I was still doing structure-based drug design, this is basically a form that you try to understand protein structures and fit drugs into those proteins in order to either activate or inactivate them, depending on whether they are beneficial or harmful. And so the idea that, of course, my parents were not firm in knowing what a protein was, apart from a constituent of your nutrition, right? But not as something that you could visualize. And so do things like this and explain structure-based drug design with what you have on a breakfast table. Do things at home and just not, listen to Kitchen Science, all the Kitchen Science podcasts and listen to your podcast, things like this, live what you guys are doing is marvelous. And, all these kind of, do you know the Naked Scientists from Britain?
I know
from
the
the BBC. They're amazing. They're amazing. They are wonderful. A bit hard to understand because I have a really strong British and Scottish accent, but they're amazing people, and it's very close to people down to earth, and try to communicate what you are doing in science to people who are not in science. Be this family members, be this friends. I mean, I think one of the nicest office hours that I once had is when I was still teaching a little bit more hardcore biochemistry. So definitely not a critical thinking course, a more a subject matter course, but it was one of my earliest teaching assignments that I had at a different institution. Is that at some point the students visited me for understanding the mechanism of a big macromolecular machine, and it was very difficult to understand for them. And I just was surprised for them coming in, and I didn't have my material. I had basically nothing there, not even a textbook. And I said, they wanted to understand the mechanism of one particular bigger enzyme that is composed of many different proteins. And then all I had was 3 bars of chocolate and a shopping bag. Okay. So, and then, basically you fold the shopping bag that it's kind of resembling the structure of that, the overall structure of that enzyme. And the enzyme was making energy. Right. And so basically the chocolate was the energy, right? So they did this by turning around in a circle, always by 120 degrees, So basically what you do is you fold the shopping bag in a triangle so it can always make, 120 degrees, and you turn it around in a circle. And each time when it hits one of the hands of the students, it kicks a chocolate bar out, right? And of course that you can imagine how popular that method was.
Oh, wow.
Because chocolate works all the time, right? No matter at which age group you apply that. So and things like this, it's great fun, right? I would also highlight in terms of what we can do in order to get a start into doing science more on the basic level, as well as onto practicing communication skills. I would highlight civic engagement projects. Civic engagement is of course something that is other people call it outreach. I like civic engagement because it is not so much the notion of just academia giving and the community receiving, which I don't think is a notion that we should say, but it's a mutual give and take on both ends. Yeah. And there's vast amounts of literature out there how much the cognitive development on both sides, especially on the academician side, how much that is beneficial through the engagement projects that you have there, not only for communication and for social skill development, but for definitely a lot of different skills that have to do with career path decision making, ethics, everything that has to do with higher order skill sets. So I would say that not only practice this with friends and family, but go out in the community and live and practice that. And then, I think we also can draw more people into the sciences, because I think you create a lot of passion, right? So and also in a very, very diverse manner, not only for one specific area of science, and very broadly. And I think this is the best thing we can do to science.
Yeah. Yeah, and one thing we got to do is not have that arrogance about some people who go into physical science are better than everybody, or literature. We got to think that, like, we're all doing the same thing, just in different ways. Just like
exactly.
There was a novel, there was a movie made on it. Jimmy Stewart was in it, No Highway in the Sky. Oh, a Neville Shute novel, Shute, that's pretty good in that regard. He portrayed in his novel the importance of both science and the arts, instead of saying, this kind of fight we've had in the history of Western culture about like one versus the other. Some aspects of our culture, they're unified. Some aspects of our culture, because our culture is schizophrenic, you got those two kind of at war. But we need them both. We got to have that holistic philosophic perspective. That's what philosophy is about. The one, the true is the whole, a holistic perspective on everything. It's very important in maintaining our integrity and having good science, and thinking about, like, if you do some science, what's the ethics of it? How does it affect biology? What's the ecological implications? Let's look at the whole to make a good decision about whether we're going to do this, or if we do, how.
I totally agree, and especially because you mentioned, I congratulate you on the notion of having, including into that holistic view also the arts. And this is from you, Melanie, definitely something the National Academy is absolutely into that. So the evidence on the educational literature of the very beneficial mutual interactions between science and the arts, all kinds of arts, is overwhelming. So if you're interested, just look up. It's all freely available. The National Academies are doing a whole symposia on the intersection between science and the arts. And there was, just the beginning of this year, there was a panel discussion. Since I'm from public health, I was at a conference for public health sciences, but the head of the National Academy of Medicine, Victor Zhao, as well as at that time still the head of the Smithsonian Institution. So not just just definitely some of the leading people in science and science education actually had a panel discussion, and said how important it was for their own education, as well as what they observe in many different institutions. For example, how beneficial it is for the reforming of medical education as well as science education to have the intersection. And you wouldn't believe how many creative approaches are out there just by the inclusion of various forms of arts into education. So I have a very dear friend who teaches anatomy and physiology, to connect it with drawing and with arts, and you wouldn't believe what this is, what creative process this is, and how much better the students learn, understand, and make connections about the functionality of the human body. It's just absolutely amazing.
That's what we need to get back to. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So, and really altogether, I think all of these approaches that we highlighted before, right, and this deeper level of understanding this can be sophisticated ways of critical thinking training. This can be very basic ways of critical thinking training and communicating things and constantly practicing. I think that's also important, right? This constantly interaction and practicing, not only in insulated approaches and immersive experiences, but really this continuous practice. And this can maybe also continuous passionate practice will help us to make science a better place, right? And then also, remove all the different, or reduce at least, the different problems that we have in science, right? With, the reproducibility problem that we have, all these kind of different issues with over-specialization. I think all of these will gradually diminish, and the more people we do that, of course, the more effective we are.
Nice, yeah. And speaking about the art and science thing, I think that comes up in the book Range. I forgot the exact details, but it talks about, I think, people who win Nobel Prizes, and they have like a 3 or 20 times higher rate than other scientists of being interested in arts or playing an instrument or something like that. Yeah. Or
when you don't have to be super skillful in this, you just the passion for it, right? So even if you're a person who enjoys going to concerts, that alone is something that enriches your mind, right?
Yeah.
You said there was an academy that was putting that a symposium, or they're going to have it on?
It's in regular intervals. The last one was, I think, in April. Is the National Academies. So I would just type in National Academies of Science is the big, the big institution in Washington D.C. And they have material for the graduate level, for the undergraduate level, as well as for the school level. They have all kinds of things, sure. And it's all freely available. It's taxpayers' money, so it's all there. And they usually, when they have one of these big symposia, they issue a report. So it's all freely available as PDF. You can download, and it's very nice. So I would look into that. And sometimes if you get onto their mailing list, you can also sometimes, when they have symposia that are being recorded, not everybody can travel always to DC and attend their symposia. Then, of course, it's with a certain time delay, you can listen to the recording. So definitely it's for the consumer and for the general public. Yeah.
And then about the art stuff, were you done, Melanie?
I kind of wanted to hear that. I couldn't hear it before, so I just wanted to get.
And with the arts thing, the integration of art and science for folks and understanding history, why it's important to understand, study the history of science and everything. Mm-hmm. If we look back, we can see some evidence of the beginning of science by looking at the Pythagoreans. I mean, they had some goofy ideas and they were wrong on some things, but they did figure out harmony in music through experimental evidence. They looked at the ratios of strings. It was actually by doing it, from what I've read so far. So that's one thing that helped science develop, connecting math to the physical world and seeing that it actually worked, that harmony thing there. Mm-hmm. And then I'm not sure if you're aware that Galileo's father was a musician, and I think he's one of the ones he was studying some of the music and drama of ancient Greece and bringing that into the culture. I think he's one of the founders of modern opera.
Oh, wow. Okay, now I did not know that, but thank you for filling me in here. So fascinating.
Galileo, so he grew up knowing music, and, at the end of his life, he'd play the violin when he was blind. Uh-huh. But I've seen in some documentary thing that was made, and I think I've read this a little bit too, that because he was so well trained in music, he would use that when he was starting to study motion down an inclined plane and free fall. So modern science comes from an integration. Unfortunately, there's this idea nowadays that in the West, we're all analytical and we break things down and there's no synthesis, and that's wrong, because that's not where our science comes from. Galileo, absolutely. He knew exactly how long it took to make certain syllables and sing, and so he'd have some strings on an inclined plane. He'd release a ball, it would roll down, and he knew from singing whether it was a second or not, and he could tell that the time was getting longer, and then he could start to use a water clock to actually time it. Mm-hmm. But they knew, very, it's the human ability to precisely know how long certain sounds are is pretty amazing. I forgot, we can go down to a 64th of a second or something, a 32nd, in our ability to grasp the timing of sounds. And so because of that, as I say, he was able to start studying the inclined planes, which connected into pendulums and free fall and studying gravity, finding out that what the ancient Greeks and what Aristotle thought was wrong. And experimenting. That's just fascinating stuff, I think, just the philosophy right there in the epistemology.
It totally is, and also it is very nicely explaining how knowledge was created, because people at that time, of course, were observers, right? So you were observers of the natural world and then tried to understand the phenomena which were around them, right? And so naturally and kind of logically, they were calling themselves also natural philosophers, right? Yeah. So a mix between early sciences and science observers and somebody who describes what he sees in a and kind of tries to make manipulations as rigorous as possible at that time with the means, but also somebody who is a philosopher still, right? And tries to, and the notion of trying to abstract from what you saw into principles was an early tendency, right? So this is remarkable, I think.
Yeah, it's fascinating. That's one thing. If I get a degree, I don't want to get a PhD in the history of science or something. It is so fascinating.
It is. The good thing is nowadays. Excuse me. Yeah, sorry.
No.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The thing is, with all the open educational resources that are out there, we can do this basically even when we are busy professionals, right? So Arturo actually got me into the audiobook / the audio courses, right? So basically on the way to, I live a little bit outside of Baltimore, so basically on the way to work or from work, there's always a good opportunity to listen to audiobooks, all kinds of things, or preparing classroom materials that way. So it's something that many of us can do without having to take formal degrees, right? So in case of course if you have time, but in case you don't have time to add an additional degree, it's a little bit more compatible with a professional schedule.
And one point to make for folks, like people think you got to specialize and focus and do this one thing to be better, but it's not quite true, because look at what Darwin did and Galileo. They would not have been able to do what they did if it wasn't for the broad spectrum of values they have.
Exactly. And all the other heroes, right? Einstein was also a generalist. He was actually, he himself said, right? I'm actually a pretty crappy mathematician. So this is his own words, right? So he said, he was able to do it, but he never trusted his math skills. So
Did
he was
have his wife check them. I heard that. Is it true?
Yeah, I don't know whether I heard that too, but I definitely also had a colleague who looked into that. So he's somebody he trusted. So he definitely tortured his colleagues with all his drafts and said, look at this. And he's supposed to be very impatient until he got the confirmation back. So definitely a very interesting. But also Marie Curie was a generalist. So she of course, she was living the marriage of breadth and depth, right? So she was obviously going very much into depth by discovering and characterizing radioactive elements, but also she was able to see what their applicability and also what their overall significance was, right? So which was absolutely remarkable for that time, and particularly under the circumstances under which she had to do research.
Like the folks haven't seen it, what she had to go through just to get a few ounces or milligrams of uranium or whatever she got. I forgot radium, but just incredible. Just the long process.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and also specifically that, at that time, and also the life circumstances she had to, do research under. So she was definitely not at the beginning well recognized. So people were, in a very male-dominated, very conservative society at that time, were not trying to give her not any credit, right? So basically, she in the beginning was always named after her husband, So and there was a supporter circle which held her up, but it must have been very difficult circumstances in that time. So
I think I don't know if Maria Montessori had to deal with some of that too. Probably.
A lot of people. I think there's probably many more scientists in many different areas of various different areas of research that never got mentioned, right? So although, maybe they were maybe just not into publishing, right? So, you mentioned Newton, right? So Newton was a sociopath, right? So he was not able to communicate at all, right? Speaking of communication skills, he was just, he was part of a society that forced him to write certain things up, although the write-ups obviously were so incomprehensible that other people had to kind of, dig out of him how to make this in any way understandable. But if he would have had his own way, he would have never shared and disseminated any knowledge. Do you know the story? He basically gave quite often lectures in front of empty lecture halls because nobody understood what his ramblings were about. Right? So he was just liked being by himself and think about things, right? So, but he was not a good communicator. So definitely, he probably would have never advanced in physics if he hadn't had people around him in that society which kind of forced him to bring that knowledge out of his brain into any kind of disseminable format. Kind of.
Some people are more alone, some people are more social, but I don't know. Or like Cavendish, from what I heard from some stuff that happened to him when he was young, that made him not want to be around people as much, just from some traumas. But I heard he'd maybe go to some to get-togethers or scientific meetings sometimes, very rarely, but would never talk to anybody and might leave early and did all his stuff alone at his own home, but did some great work.
It's a personal nature, right? Yeah. But speaking of the factors that contribute to advanced science, or what can you do to do science better? Science is a community effort, right? So science has never been a lonely effort. Of course, there's some discoveries that initially are alone, but they either get never discovered or, get discovered late or kind of shared late. So science is always something that lives off the community, and the community is a corrective, right? So that also means that you have other people around you who give you feedback, right? Give you feedback and insight, right? So, and this is why we need to, really, in my view, start with the communication skills, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's not only a means to make us interact better with others. It is not only a way to transmit our passions or gain new passions, gain new insights, further our curiosity. It's also a way to figure out whether we are wrong with what we are doing, right? And should perhaps correct our path. Right? Yeah. So it might be that our understanding is not correctly, right? So, it's just because we like to seek knowledge doesn't mean that we are doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Right. Also, especially when you talked about, and we talked earlier about the impressive approaches to value education in Scandinavian countries. Essentially, this is early forms of ethics, right? Although ethics is a very difficult topic, but children and students are not afraid of ethics. This is a little bit more of a parenting approach that we try to protect them, but actually they're not afraid of ethics. And when you then later on, when you ask ethical questions on the college and graduate and postgraduate level, there's all kinds of questions that we definitely need to ask ourselves constantly while doing science. Like, so for example, you mentioned epistemology, right? So where does epistemology clash with ethics? Quite often, right? Just think about germline manipulation. Humankind is currently able to manipulate germlines, right? So, and it's being done, right? So, and, question is, should we do everything that we can do?
Could you say that again? Gundula, I couldn't hear what.
Should we say everything that we can do? Is basically where epistemology means what the power that comes with knowledge creation clashes with ethics, right? Ethics is asking you to reflect whether what you're doing is the right thing, right? So, and this intersection between epistemology and ethics tells you, well, think about whether everything that is in your power of doing is the right thing to do. Usually there's not a clear-cut answer, right? There's not a 0 or 100% answer. There's a gray zone in between. But it also means that we need to think about this and we need to discuss this. Speaking of communication skills and speaking of the importance of a community. Because, of course, in that community there will be many different views. But we need to engage in this discussion process. And this discussion process is super important for advancement of science. And also creates that community feeling, right? That we as a community need to advance science, to make science better. So no individual can advance science. We need to do this together. And so, of course, that way you need to be able to live with controversial views and you need to be able to discuss, right? So like giving you an example from my own school, we, of course, as a public health school are very much into vaccinations and, kind of eradicating diseases. But as you know, right, a lot of people are against vaccinations. So then there's a way to try and figure out what are good communication strategies to deal with an anti-vaxxer campaign, right? So, and to work with the stubborn arguments that, allegedly vaccines cause autism, mm-hmm. which is still there, right? So, but, and it's a stubborn community. Mm-hmm. And by the way, this is an amazing animal. What kind of...
Oh, thank you.
What kind of... Is this a cat?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, this is a tiger. This is not a cat. Yeah. Cool.
He's good.
What's his name?
Prince, like king,
of course.
queen, prince.
Of course. What else could it be?
Yeah. He can actually... So, folks, we're looking at my cat right now. He's actually amazing. It's like, a lot of cats, you try to put a leash on them, takes a little while, or... I recently got this like kitty holster thing. He took to it like nothing. A lot of cats would just reject it, run. They'd get it off their back. This guy is so awesome. I put a kitty holster thing on him, put a leash, and he's learned. It's interesting. This is again where we got to apply science in more areas and realize it's not some abstract academic thing or cold-hearted thing. We got to look at cause effect and see how mm-hmm. is this animal acting. I'm noticing mm-hmm. how he's learning really quickly in certain situations. Like he used to like to go onto people's porches, but I don't want him doing that. So I stopped him like once or twice. He learned from once mm-hmm. or twice on me tugging the leash not to do that. or there was some area he wanted to go in, and I've stopped him, like tugged on the leash a little bit once or twice. And so when we're out walking, he doesn't go over there. It's just amazing how quickly they learn and how.
If he wants to, right? So
Yeah,
your cat
exactly.
probably chooses to learn, right?
Just
so
like people, same as people, yeah.
Yeah, maybe he reflected on experience. So, it's like, maybe he had a little Dewey experience, and maybe he just thought about and probably very coldly calculated that he would be a more effective tin opener if you would if he would comply in this moment, right? So, like,
but it's partly.
Well, if your listeners could see the cat right now, of course they would be impressed. So it's a really good, beautiful animal.
And it's partly earning it, knowing how to treat animals, taking them seriously, not thinking that animals are stupid or unconscious or anything like Descartes did, knowing that it's a living, breathing thing and treating it really well, then it knows, I've earned its trust. And that's like part of the background to being able to take it out for a walk successfully.
Absolutely. Yeah, we need, as you said earlier, we need to think holistically, right? So and I think mindfulness techniques, because you asked me earlier about what can we do, this sounds a bit abstract, but I think mindfulness can be a very easy exercise that many of us can do in our daily life, integrated anywhere, right? Also because it's very relaxing, right? And it's very satisfying because we see things more consciously, right? So not only in terms of, for example, connected with wellness, for example, think about what makes you feel well, but also connect us with more consciously experiencing the world, right? When you sit here at this amazing, I'm not sure whether you can see that, but I'm sitting here and the sun goes slowly down, right? And then within a few moments, the sky will be in many different colors, right? So why is the sky blue? Why is the evening sky red? So things like this. And why, how fortunate are we that the world is so beautiful, right? So wouldn't we, by a better understanding, have a better means to protect it, right? So to keep it where it is. Our children want to have the same world or a better one. And so, all these kind of things, we need to understand the bigger context much better in order to become effective at the big questions that are up for us to answer, right? So, mass epidemics, climate change, global protection, poverty, scarcity of resources, water, food, kind of overpopulation, all of these things, nothing of that can be solved by one single discipline, research group, something. This is all something that needs to be done systemically. And this maybe comes to the last point that we could say, what can we do together? Science is a community effort, and also a place where communication is important. What is also important is our social skills in terms of teamwork, right? Because the team science disciplines are the ones which are being successful, right? So there is no way how we can do things alone and how we can solve all the big problems alone. We need to do this together, right? And for this, you need also skills. Speaking of skill development, you do not only need critical thinking skills, you also need certain social skills and certain skills that make us understand that we need to do things together. This has to do with altruism. This has to do with not always putting yourself first. This has to do with understanding that hyper-competition is not healthy, right? So we need to do things in a trustful environment together. And these are experiences that we need to provide our students with. It's not something that comes naturally. Naturally, humans are territorial and protective, like your cat. Like cats are territorial, right? And if fear normally teaches you to be protective of what you have. So, but it has also been shown in nature that there is a evolutionary advantage within a population of altruism. Right, so because altruism is something that you would think about, why actually, right? So, but altruism has been shown in certain observational studies for animals that altruism brought the population further, because it was good for the greater good. So at the end, on for the social cohesiveness. And so basically, I think when we apply these principles, and again we abstract the principle and apply it to something else, to the scientific community, and more think about how we can advance, us. Humankind, the way how we all make use of the knowledge that we create together, I think then we have a chance of tackling the problems that are ahead of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, there's some specialization in schools, and some of that's good, but it's not going to function well without the philosophic perspective and being more of a generalist.
Unfortunately, I have 3 minutes left.
Okay, yeah, cool.
Me too, kind of, I guess. So that works out.
So
Nice
cool.
to talk to you, Gundula. Thank you so much. for
Wonderful
taking time
talking to you both.
out of your schedule.
No, it was lovely. I mean, it was perfect because I just, I had much more relaxed time sitting at this airport here. So like,
Good.
so I hope the surroundings wasn't too loud, but it was a good corner here, obviously.
Yeah, very nice.
So yeah,
Wonderful.
folks,
Well, thank you for doing this. It was fun talking to you both.
and thank
Thank
you
you.
for
Good to talk to you.
saying some last words before I even asked. You already wrapped up. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Okay, thank you
Well,
for your time.
Yep. Have a great Christmas.
Okay.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry
Merry
Christmas.
to you both.
Hope you have a good
Yes,
flight.
exactly. Happy New Year. It's the year's almost over. We couldn't believe it, right?
Yeah.
I know. Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you so much.
Thank
Nice to
you.
meet you. Nice.
See you. Bye.
Bye.